I noticed, at least to me, new images on the altar. There's the one right behind me, and then there's a Jizo back there. Do you know where they came from?
No idea where
No?
either of those came from.
Maybe they were gifts from Ejo's travels to the.
I think oftentimes when an icon like that is found, it'll be put on the altar for a short period of time.
Okay.
The Jizo I don't know, but the jade Buddha seems to be a place where things like that end up before they make their way to another home.
Oh, so it was found somewhere? Well,
I have no idea.
That's kind of cool. I wouldn't mind finding a Buddha just somewhere.
You did?
Yeah. Yeah, I did. Okay, so oddly enough, my inspiration to talk about merit came from chatting with a CPE student at the hospital who is Buddhist. She practices in the Eugene Priory, at the Eugene Priory, and has been in the Shasta Abbey tradition for a long, long time, lived in England for a long time and so on. But she was also very dedicated and knowledgeable and studied Christian before that. And she said to me, Buddhists never talk about grace. And so my understanding of grace is that it's God's grace is, we get it, whether we deserve it or not. God just loves us no matter what. That's sort of the really bird's eye view of grace. I don't have a lot of understanding about it. She was quoting Paul Tillich, and I'm like, that's beyond my area of expertise. But it made me think about merit. Like we offer merit. And so I just kind of got to thinking about it and did some research on it and thought I would offer you what I found, and maybe we can have some discussion about it. So first, maybe what do y'all think about when you think about merit, or what does it feel like we're doing when we dedicate merit? I mean, anybody can just say whatever, or not.
Keeping the wheel off.
Pardon me?
I think of offering merit as an act of generosity and keeping the wheel of generosity moving.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not doing something to hoard it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That we're keeping something flowing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we offer merit, we have a bigger picture in mind.
Mm-hmm. Spot on. We'll talk about that. Anybody else?
I think it's really beautiful that we offer merit to demons and wraiths in some of our texts.
Yes, exactly. And I'll talk about that too. Well, you all have written the talk already. Yay. So if you notice this morning, for those of you who maybe are brand new and don't know anything about this, that's part of what my talk is geared toward, if you don't know. So we dedicated the Merit of the Heart Sutra, make sure I got it right here, among other beings, to great benefactor of the doctor and the original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. We're dedicating merit to the Buddha. Why are we doing that? Hasn't he already got enough? I'm just, it is one way of looking at it. And we also dedicate the merit of our practice of the Great Compassionate Heart Dharani to those who have died and are suffering. So again, what is this merit? What does it mean to dedicate it? What effect does it have? And how do we offer something we're not even sure we have to offer? How do I know I've got merit to dedicate? So I'll start by saying that dedicating merit is an old practice in Buddhism that has its roots in pre-Buddhist Vedic rites. So the Buddha didn't invent it. It's been around for a long time. So in Zen, merit is accumulated, and one way being the chanting of sutra, and then it's given away by formally reciting a verse for the dedication of merit, which we do at the end of many sutras. So it states how the merit was generated, the chanting of the sutra, names the recipient, the Buddha, people who have died, and so on, and then the hoped for outcome. So for instance, people who are deceased, we hope that all doubts may be cleared. So that's kind of the pattern of dedicating merit. But I do get kind of into word geek mode now and then. So I thought I would look at the meanings of merit in English and then look at it in Sanskrit. English, not just English, but generally European definitions of merit. So Latin, Greek, French, and so on. So the English meaning of merit is the quality of a person's character or conduct deserving of reward or punishment, that such reward or punishment, excellence, worthiness, benefit, right to be rewarded for spiritual service. This is the one I like the best. Retribution at doomsday. I'm like, okay. Virtue through which Jesus Christ, this is Christian perspective, obviously, virtue through which Jesus Christ brings about salvation, or virtue possessed by a holy person. So that's kind of our English meaning of merit, and I think it had a specifically Christian context in the original term. We use it differently now, such as meritocracy as an example. I don't want to go into that, but that's just another way we look at merit. So I think a key component of our generally European definitions is this sense of deserving. We deserve it or we don't. So really, this whole issue of deserve is really, I feel like it's kind of at least in my childhood, it really permeated my childhood and how I was brought up, whether I deserve something or not. I don't get it unless I deserve it. And that evaluation of whether I deserved it or not seemed really arbitrary to me, but that's beside the point. So, in any case, so there's also, like Reiko brought up, a sense of ownership, of permanence, like I earn merit and I keep it and I don't give it away to anybody. So the Sanskrit term, and I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce it, punna. I tried to look it up online, but it's hard to, there are like 5 or 6 different pronunciations depending on the region of India that they were speaking from. So punna, we'll go with that one, which we translate as merit, does in fact mean merit. It means that same similar thing, meritorious action, virtue. But it kind of takes a different path. So Theravada Buddhist commentator Dhammapala defined merit as, or punna, I'm not going to say merit, defined punna as something that cleans or purifies in the life continuity. So I think it's really important to understand that the Buddhist term does not imply a sense of deserving. I think that's a really key piece. And as we'll see, it has more of an impermanent character than the English merit. And I dove into the history a little bit. So to understand the Buddhist term, I think it's interesting at least to know the pre-Buddhist Vedic or Brahmanical roots of merit, which begins with how karma works in the Vedic tradition and in the Buddhist tradition. They're different. So in Buddhism, karma means intentional action and has an ethical basis. It can be skillful or unskillful. And when the Buddha was teaching about this, he used readily understood agricultural terms when speaking about karma, using the analogy of sowing, S-O-W-I-N-G, sowing, ripening, and harvesting to explain the process by which intentional actions produce seeds that germinate, ripen, and then, meeting the necessary conditions, they bear fruit by necessity. So you've probably heard, other Buddhist teachings talk about the seeds that we all have seeds of skillful or unskillful actions. And which ones we water, which ones ripen, or which ones are going to bear fruit. That's really depending on how we care for these seeds that we all have. So in the Buddhist time, what is sown, S-O-W-N, are present actions. So we're sowing our seeds through our present actions. And what is harvested are future rebirths. We want to be reborn in a better place than we were before. So Buddhist cosmology describes the universe as made up of 6 realms. We talk about the 6 realms in our dedication, 3 upper realms and 3 lower realms. So knowing that complete release from the cycle of birth and death is a faraway goal, taking kalpas perhaps, the immediate need is to generate good karma to assure or at least increase the chances of a positive rebirth. And I also say that a positive rebirth gives us the opportunity to practice. My understanding in Buddhism, if you're born in one of the 3 lower realms, the hell realms, an animal realm, I forget what the other one is, you don't have a lot of chance to practice. So you want to keep practicing. So you don't want to be born in one of the 3 lower realms. Oh, here we go. I wrote it down. The hell realms: animals, hungry ghosts, and hell. Animals, hungry ghosts, and I like this, the hell denizens. The denizens of hell. Sounds so dark, doesn't it? So in Vedic practices, karma meant specifically ritual action. I know about this much about Vedic and Brahmanical traditions, but they were very heavily ritualized and priest-oriented. So when someone died, a priest was called to perform the necessary rites for the deceased in order to ensure a rebirth and a happy future existence, regardless of ethical conduct. I think that's a really interesting piece for the Vedic perspective. Doesn't matter how you behaved. It kind of makes me think of at the hospital. I'm often asked to try to convert people at their death so that they go to heaven. I'm like, I cannot do that. But people do that. Can he accept the Lord Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior right at the moment of his last breath so that he goes to heaven? So it's not that much different from what the ancient, Vedic traditions did. So what the Buddha's innovation was, or so it's taught, was to make ethical motivation pivotal to the outcome of the karmic process. So the Buddha switched it from a priestly rite to ethical motivation. You got to think that probably a lot of like always has been, probably a lot of unethical stuff was happening during the Buddha's time. That guy, you're going to want that guy to go to heaven. So he individualized karma so that it was one's own action that secures a positive future rebirth. But he didn't stop there. So I want to make it sounds like we're kind of going towards individualism here. So he individualized karma to make it so that it would be upon us to make good choices. But it's further than that. So it's not like we own this. So by practicing skillful actions, such as the good stuff, giving, restraint, expounding the Dharma, practitioners could accumulate positive karmic influences, which came to be known as merit or punya. Skillful action thus became the driving force for a fortunate rebirth. And this was one of the Buddha's innovations from the Vedic traditions. However, because actually all over the world, not just in Vedic traditions, all over the world, what do we do about the dead? If it's our actions that ensure positive rebirth, what about those who've already died? So there was an answer for that. The Buddha also taught that a person accumulating merit can influence another person to start accumulating merit by in turn performing their own deeds. So if I do good deeds, I can influence you to do good deeds. And so the second person, so you and I are doing good deeds together because I influenced you or you influenced me, however you want to look at it. We can share. We can share that merit. So if I do good merit, if I generate merit and do good deeds, you can generate merit and do good deeds, and we can share. We can be sharing our merit together, which I think is kind of a cool thing. And if you think about it, this is one of the 4 Brahmaviharas, mudita, appreciative joy, the feeling of joy because others are happy. So that's one of the 4 Brahmaviharas. So we're still on the track of what do we do about the dead. The dead may not be able to accrue merit for themselves, but all is not lost because those in the human realm can, by empathy, cause them to share in the living's merit if the dead give rise to a wish to emulate the skillful deed, whether or not they're able to, which is pretty interesting. I'm still not quite sure how that works, but I'll take it. In any case, I think that the outcome of this was that it opened up the possibility of the transfer of merit to all beings in all the realms and not just those in the human sphere. So however that worked, we opened up that realm. So you mentioned the people in the hell realms or in one of those 3 lower realms. This is what we do in Sagaki and in the evening service. Our hearts set on awakening, we offer this gift of pure food to you, hungry ghosts from every corner of the Dharma realm, from every country and land without number. You departed long ago, gather here. Come, all you spirits, from earth gods of mountains and rivers to demons and wraiths of the barren wastes. Accept this food given in love and compassion. So we invite the people who are in these various unpleasant realms. So in Buddhism, or Mahayana Buddhism, there was a further development. Merit could be transferred whether or not the recipient is aware of it. Thus, we arrive at the dedication of merit for the benefit of all beings, which is what we do after our many chantings in our services. So you can see the big difference here. We're not keeping it for ourselves. We're giving it away for the benefit of all beings. It's the tail end of grass pollen, I guess. So, for instance, we say, for instance, may we realize with all beings the Buddha way. All of these things are really important. I like this little story that was shared in the, I'm not sure I'm going to say it right, the Kshitigarbha Sutra. So the connection between the transfer of merit to the dead and the transfer of merit to all sentient beings is made in this sutra, which is very long and kind of complex, but this is a little summary paragraph. So there was once a young girl called Sacred Girl who was worried that her mother, who disparaged the teachings in life, may be suffering in hell after her death. In recompense for her mother's unskillful actions, the girl sold her possessions and made offerings of them to the Buddha of her time. One day, the Buddha told her to go home and that there she would find the answer to her question. This she did, and she was transported to the hell realms where her mother had been residing, but was told that because of the merit that she had transferred to her mother, the latter had just been released into the heavenly realms. The girl was relieved, but very disturbed at seeing the suffering of all the hell beings. Thus, she conceived a great vow to empty the hell realms of all beings, which is our vow as Mahayana Buddhists. May all beings be liberated. May all be free. Now we're going to get to why we dedicate merit to the Buddha, which is super interesting. This is a really complex topic. It's not like it's this and then we do this. I could have gone, you could do lots of research on this. I'm just giving you like a little taste of this, I hope. So we also transfer merit to Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, deceased Zen masters, and ancestors, which may again seem odd given that we kind of think maybe they're already enlightened. But why are we dedicating our merit to them? So from a Buddhist perspective, it makes perfect sense. The great field of merit that these beings generated over time is still operating for the benefit of all beings. Thus, to turn over one's personal merit generated through practice allows us to do two things, which is what Reiko spoke of: to practice dana paramita, or giving, the first of the 6 practices of the Bodhisattva, and to align our own practice with the field of merit that has already proven itself for the benefit of all beings. So again, we can see that merit is not something we hold on to for ourselves, but something that we generate and give away for the benefit of all beings. All beings, all of them. No one's left out. Makes me think of a story of Bodhidharma and the Emperor Wu. Some of you may have heard this. So Bodhidharma, who was the first Zen patriarch from India to go into China, he came to visit Emperor Wu around the year CE 520. The emperor told Bodhidharma that he had built temples, is that page 4? Yeah, temples, and given financial support to the monastic community. And he asked the patriarch how much merit he had gained for these actions. Bodhidharma replied, none whatsoever. So it always puzzled me, none whatsoever. And I think my theory is that Emperor Wu was thinking only of how much merit he'd accumulated for himself. If maybe he'd said, how much merit was accumulated, regardless of whether it's mine, that I can give away. He didn't ask the question that way. He asked, how much merit did I get? How much did I get? Tally it up. And who could quantify it anyway? Who could quantify the merit? So, questions, thoughts, comments? So far, I've got more, a little bit more.
It sounds so much like selling indulgences in the
Does it? Yeah.
in the
How so? Say more.
Christian church. Well, there's this kind of like thing that the king.
Yeah. Oh, the king guy. Yeah. The Emperor Wu.
It's really about you. It's like, how do I benefit myself by pretending to benefit somebody else? Yeah.
You know, and I think that there's, there's always a dark side to things. I mean, there's always like a really, you think? I think we have to be really, really careful, that we have to really be very thoughtful about how we do all of these things. I mean, I think about many people have asked me, this is just a kind of example. I'm really into the practice of self-compassion for myself, and I teach it to others at the hospital. And people will say, well, doesn't like being kind to yourself let you off the hook? And I'm like, it can, but you have to be really careful that you're not doing that. Doesn't, if you make a mistake and you have compassion for yourself because of it, does it let you off the hook? I'm going to say, if you're really practicing compassion for yourself, no. But it could be used that way easily. So, but yeah, selling indulgences. I forget exactly what that was.
I think it was in it by Martin Luther.
Maybe one of the reasons why Martin Luther decided to heck with this business, I'm going to go start my own.
It was a big fundraiser, you know.
Yeah, right.
They needed a lot of money, and they were like, "Listen, your family's all gonna go to this place called Purgatory, and the only way they can get out is if you buy these things."
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
And Martin was like, "No."
No. You know, and I, you know, again, religions become institutionalized. They become really focused on the needs of the human realm. I mean, it happens, and it's something that we all have to be aware of. But yeah, you know, this isn't it. So I read this really interesting article. This is I love looking at teachers that I don't have any clue who they are. This is she's a woman of Persian descent. She's a insight meditation Vipassana teacher. I know I'm going to mangle her name, Nikki Murgafori. And she's part of the Spirit Rock group and so on. But she wrote this really interesting article about dedicated merits. I'm just going to kind of pull from that a little bit. This part she didn't say, but I just, you know, to shift the focus to a context maybe that we can more readily understand, is that we tend as a culture, and you know, I'm including myself in this, to be rather viciously self-critical and judgmental. We tend to compare ourselves to others or some idea of how things should be and so on. Perhaps like Emperor Wu, you know, he wasn't a whole lot, he lived a long time ago, but we want to quantify or somehow measure our practice or merit or generosity and so on. And, you know, I always think of, whenever I was thinking about that, I was like, you know, one period of Zazen is one period of Zazen. That's it. You know, you don't compare it to the one that may have been better the day before or the one you hope to be better the next day. It's done. So we try not to compare. And I personally think that comparison has its positive aspects, but it's kind of toxic in our culture these days. It's the way we compare ourselves to different things. So what Nikki Murgafori writes is that however shoddy or incomplete or crummy our practice might feel at times, however sleepy we get, I mean, this is me during, you know, rahatsu, you know, the grass way, or the, you know, the pecking bird or whatever it is, you know, however crappy that might feel at times, in and of itself, it's a meritorious act of goodness. Just the fact that we decided to sit is important. It's not how much our mind calms down or how many insights arise or how sleepy we are or how much our stomach is growling or any of those things, but simply our intention of having tried, having sat even for a minute, having walked in Kinhin or other meditation, having aligned our actions with our highest intentions, even for a minute. Even one moment of attempting to settle one's mind and heart is a moment of cultivating goodness, which in turn inclines our heart and mind towards more goodness, love, and wisdom. And let us hold with humility and awe. This is where awe really is. You know, oh, that's awesome. Well, is it? This is awesome. How each little moment of goodness may percolate through the world in the way that our thoughts and actions can affect ourselves and others. So the practice of dedicating merit is building trust that our practice is synonymous with goodness and seeing the potential for the powerful rippling effect of our practice. We don't know. I mean, that's kind of how I feel at the hospital sometimes when I'm trying to, you know, somebody comes to me and they're in deep grief and I'm like, all I can do is plant a mustard seed and I have no clue where this is going to go for them. But I hope that it goes well. And so again, Reiko, you could have given the talk. Just teasing. Another aspect is that our dedication of merit is a radical act of generosity. Or the way another source put it, in dedicating the merit of our meditation to ease the suffering of all beings, we engage in an act of radical imagination. Our radical imagining is that all beings are free, at peace and awakened. All beings, everybody, the people we like, the people we don't like, the earwig in your bathroom, all of them. I always look at earwigs and go, okay, I'll get you outside. But imagining this stretches our minds and creates the possibility for it to happen. Maybe not tonight or in our own lifetime, but maybe someday. Someone was telling me that there's some, I haven't looked this up, so I have no idea, but that animals seem to be starting to rebel against us. Like whales are trying to intentionally overturn boats in the ocean. Just like, go. I don't want anybody to be killed, but it's like, okay, we've had enough of you folks for the last 1.5 million years. We've had enough of you. So it's just kind of interesting. So, I don't know why I thought of that, but just something, it can change our relationship. Things can change, not just us can change, but other things can change. So again, in this radical imagining, our vision includes everyone equally in our love, even the ones that really get under our skin. This develops our generosity, our loving kindness, our commitment to the equality of beings. And importantly, of course, we're not condoning anybody's bad actions, and there's plenty of that around. We're not condoning any of that. And there's a lot of really painful stuff happening. I personally, I can't read the news very much because it depresses me, for one. But just reading about the record high temperatures across the world it's extremely painful to read. And we're lucky here at the moment in Oregon. I don't know. Today, this year, we don't know what the future holds for us in terms of that. So we want to include the entire world, Mother Earth, the ants, those gorgeous flowers at the Hojo, everything. So our practice looks towards the possibility of liberating and transforming the ignorance that drives human, mostly destructive actions. Page 4, page 5. So I had a forest walk Thursday night, and the only person who came was Shanae. Bless her. It was fine. I got a chance to hang out with Shanae for 2 hours, which was really a pleasure. It was really a privilege to hang out with her. And I was telling her about this talk, and she said, well, what about metta? What about Maitri, the practice of metta? And I thought, oh, right, of course. And so that the practice of dedicating merit is actually synonymous with this practice of metta, this practice of what we translate as loving kindness, but what is, at least from what I've read, more appropriately translated as goodwill. So I thought I would read, I didn't make copies, I just thought I would read the Metta Sutra as not chant it, but just read it. And just offer it as kind of, winding down towards the closing of this talk. And it's a way that, it really encapsulates the paramitas, it encapsulates the skillful actions that we try to cultivate and that we then extend and dedicate out into the world. So, this is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none, through anger or ill will, wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Any other comments?
One of the things that Buddhism does, at least they've learned, is refuge recovery, which is addiction, and which is, a way to get out of pain. And they talk to each other. And they open themselves up, which they couldn't do with their parents. And it cures people.
The connection, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it cures people because, I did that. And you may feel bad about yourself, but you learn that you did other things, and that's okay, because that's the disease that you had.
Right.
And you cure it by talking to each other,
Right.
by giving support to each other.
And sharing. And I think you've said to me, and I've always held this, is that addiction, I'll just say addiction is a disease of isolation.
Yes.
And so, when we isolate ourselves, I sometimes think when humans are suffering, we're not that much different from cats. Cats, if they're sick or if they're injured, they tend to hide. We do that too. But, cats are not really social creatures in the same way that we are. I have a cat actually right now that's not super well, and she's just been situated.
I should speak for cats.
Okay, yes, okay, I'll let you speak for cats, okay. Do your cats don't hide when they don't feel well?
No.
Mine do. I had a cat once who had he had to have some medical attention and he had to wear a cone. And every time I put it on him, he would immediately leave the room and go hide. He was mortified. So yes, we share, and and I think there's I suspect that in refuge recovery, there's a lot of feeling of mudita or sympathetic joy when someone is doing well. The community rejoices. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the good thing about refuge recovery is not AA or stuff like that. It isn't God who makes you sober. It's the sharing.
It's the community.
Community.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else?
Anya,
Mm.
thank you for that.
Yeah,
It
sure.
was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
So for some of our talk dedicated to the topic of merit.
Yeah.
I really appreciated that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was just thinking about what, Tim, on what you were saying, and it's always been something I've thought about when we dedicate the merit, and I think it really speaks to the interconnectedness that we have as people. You know, when we dedicate the merit to those who are suffering, it's because we suffer too.
Yes,
And
yes,
I think it always moves me. I think it's really profound, and
yeah.
um,
And I
to lift that up a little bit.
yeah, I know. I think you're right. I think some sources I read said that it's not, dedicating merit, generating merit is really common in it's a stronger focus in most East Asian Buddhism, but not so much here. It's kind of like we want to just, as Westerners, I suppose, maybe Americans in particular, we want to cut to the chase. We don't want to do these what one writer termed these lowly practices of generating, accumulating, and giving away merit. So it's something to think about. I mean, we do it when we chant, but maybe I'll offer this paragraph by Nikki Murgafori, where she writes, I think this is part of what you're talking about here. At some point along the arc of our maturity as practitioners, our practice becomes indistinguishable from our life. Our practice becomes our life, and our life becomes our practice.
Wow.
Consider what it would be like to live your life as an offering to all beings. What if, at the end of every day, you dedicate, freely offering up for the benefit of all beings everywhere, all the merit or goodness generated from living, and here she kind of pulls in Mary Oliver, all the merit or goodness generated from living your one and only precious life. The only one we know about. So I just think, I think you're right. Lifting up this generation and accumulation of merit could be a very important part of our practice.
It's a beautiful idea
Yeah,
to dedicate the merit.
dedicate the merit at the end of every day. Like I dedicate whatever good I did today. What's that song? Magic Penny.
You
Say-
also have to be careful of pride.
Yes. You're right. You're right. I mean, I think these are all the things we're going to struggle with. I wish I looked this up more, but the near enemy. The near enemies is a teaching in Buddhism where you have like the near enemy of, I don't know. I'm just going to say the near enemy of there's some of the notions that are really close, like envy and admiration. I'll just use that as a not a very good example, but they're close. You have to be really careful. What's the feeling behind it? What's the bodily energy that you're feeling? Is it like, oh, I've got all this energy, all this merit that I'm going to give away, or is it like just a simple offering? So yeah, I think you're right. We have to be very careful of those near enemies, as they're called.
That's why you can point to Bodhidharma's teaching. to
Yes,
Emperor
exactly.
Wu.
Yeah, I think Emperor Wu was like, look what I did.
Isn't that like talking about Emperor Wu makes me think about like a subtle manipulation, I guess, without whether you realize it or not. I mean, we're not always aware of who we are
Correct.
at every moment. And him going, oh, here's all these things, some manipulative thing to gain validation, basically.
Yeah. He was looking for the kudos from Bodhidharma. And I think the other part of that I didn't read was something along the lines of, well, who are you to talk to me? Emperor Wu says, well, who are you to talk to me this way? And Bodhidharma was like, I don't know. And he left. So, he just was not going to feed into Emperor Wu's deal here. He just wasn't going to feed into it at all. Well, I'm Bodhidharma, so he wasn't going to pick up that bait, if you will. He wasn't going to take the bait to sort of like engage in a battle of wills or a battle of egos. Yeah.
I think it's important to remember in this that Emperor Wu, we kind of talk about him like he definitely had an angle where he's like, how much have I gained? But he also did a lot of good.
Yes, he did. He did do a lot of good.
He did
Correct.
do like all this stuff that traditionally probably would have, at least in some provisional way, like generated merit.
Yeah, yes.
And so I think it's that's
We
an
can't
interesting
forget
thing.
that.
Just to like turn in the head that even when I'm doing something that's great and I'm doing it in this like super selfless way, this thing that's accumulating is maybe not a thing that's accumulating, but it's definitely a thing that's accumulating.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, Emperor Wu did many good things. It's true. There's a whole Wikipedia entry dedicated to Emperor Wu and all the things that he did. If you want to read about him. So,
So this gets very complicated.
yes, it does. Yes, it
So
does.
I recently, as in 9:30 this morning,
Okay.
I was sort of ruminating on the fact that I had started the practice of dedicating merit to someone who was causing me consternation.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized this morning at 9:30 that, oh my God, I'm not so consternated anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. Which was great until I started thinking, well, gee, I could start dedicating merit to this other person who's annoying the crap out of me. And it became then immediately I thought, oh, well, gee, I could just check off all the annoyances.
All the annoying people.
I wouldn't have to do anything else but dedicate merit. So there's this delusions are inexhaustible.
Right. Yeah. And it just reminds me of something. Doku Will is a chaplain at the hospital with me, and he was talking about. Every morning we have a meeting of all the chaplains, and we talk about what's happening. What's happening during the day, who's going to do what, and all that kind of thing. And we have a sacred moment at the end of that where somebody shares something. Could be anything. Doku shared. He talked about the four bodhisattva vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. And he talked, but he kind of gave a different perspective on it. It's like I'm free. Part of what I'm doing is I'm liberating them from me. So that they don't like live in my head and cause me to do things that I wouldn't necessarily otherwise do. So there is a piece to that. It's just kind of an interesting perspective. It's like with mindfulness practice or with metta practice. You got all these. You're practicing sending loving kindness and good thoughts to people that you don't like, to people who do terrible things, and people who've harmed you personally, people who just are doing harm in general in the world. And part of what that does actually is the energy, the hold they have on you does lessen, and you have some clarity about the issue. So I think that's important.
I know, but it just felt kind of selfish to just think that it would be such an easy fix.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it
there's
probably
something
won't work.
to reflect on. It probably won't work. They'll still do the things they do.
I'm not so concerned about them doing the things they do. I'm concerned about my reacting the way I do.
Well, and I think that's a piece of it, honestly. I don't think it's selfish. I think, how we respond to things, it can make a difference. Yeah. So, but it is interesting to think about it. And I think the reflection on it is what's really important. I think that's one thing about Buddhism is there's no easy answers to a lot of this stuff.
Thank you.
Ooh.